Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of World Cup Group Talk, where today we're going to be talking all things Group H. Group H, however you want to say it. This is the fourth episode, which is absolutely crazy to think we're already halfway through our groups. But in this series, if you don't know, we are going to be joined by a special guest in each episode that will focus on one of the nations in the group. And today we're joined by Alina to talk about all things Germany. Alina, by now, is a very loved and familiar face on my channel here. She is a Germany-based journalist covering all things German football, the from Bundesliga when the season is ongoing. Plenty of writing for 90-minute football, covering all things German women's national team, Swedish women's national team, both in German and in English, which is certainly why I think Alina is a perfect guest to talk about the ins and outs about one of the favorites going into this competition. So without further ado, let's roll into it. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be joined once again by a veteran on the channel now, Alina. Alina, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm very good because today we're going to be talking about all things Germany, one of the biggest favorites to win this competition after a very strong showing in the Euros. They're also no stranger to winning this competition before because they've done it twice before. We've already had our 28 provincial squad announced. We're going to see 5 of those players being cut. Looking at the names, 20 of the 23 players that we saw in the squad are in. Obviously, the ones that are missing out are out with injury, with the likes of Julia Gwynn. Which names do you expect probably won't make the cut? Which ones do you think will be surprised a little bit about? How do you see that final 23rd looking?
I think the final 23 will probably look a bit like at the Euros, because that's the team that know each other well, that's well rehearsed, I'd say. So I don't expect big surprises. I think, I mean, it's quite luxury to have so many great players on one squad, and it's really hard to cut them down onto 23 and 5 great players that have to go. But I think for those 5 great players, it's good for them that they are on the squad training with the team for the next week, so that they get some experience and maybe get a chance at the next big tournament.
Yeah, I think probably Germany is one of those teams that is very generous with the players that they can choose from. It's a massive pool of players. Speaking on some of these players, I'm sure we're going to see some of, I don't want to say like a rising star, but certainly some of these youngsters make a good name for themselves. We had a few of those last Euros. I think looking at some of these prospects, who do you think is going to be, or who would you expect to make a very good case for themselves this summer, looking at maybe their season or minutes with the international squad as of lately?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you have to keep an eye on Lena Oberdorf, who has had a great season with Wolfsburg, and also smashed it at the Euros, becoming young player of the tournament. And she's just developed ever since and just played so many great games, scoring really important goals for Wolfsburg that also looked great. Remember that far range shot against, I think it was Cologne, or that was really, really good. And if she can keep up with that form, and bring it to Australia, then Germany is really good in midfield. And that definitely midfield is the strength of the German team, I'd say. I think I would expect some players to be cut there, because I think the team is a bit short on defenders. So I really hope that they don't cut out a defender, because I think the more defenders you take with you, the better it is. Because they're so stacked in midfield, in attack. I think that's really well balanced, and you can cut out most players there, I'd say. Lena Oberdorf, of course, Jule Brandt, also from VfL Wolfsburg, who has had limited minutes, I'd say, towards the end of the season. So I'm really curious to see how many minutes she will get during the next pre-matches of Germany. But I also would say keep an eye on the more established youngsters at the German national team, like Clara Bühl or Lea Schüller. They are definitely ones to keep players to keep an eye on, and of course Alexandra Popp and the usual suspects. But I was thinking more of the younger players.
Yeah, for sure. And an Alexandra Popp, I think whenever that name comes up in that German squad, you have to remember her missing, unfortunately, the Euros final, which could have played in a different way had she been on. We'll get to her in a second. But if we are to take a closer look at maybe some of the opposition that they've recently been able to go after in friendlies, particularly Germany has been really good with going after the US. It was a close, tight loss to them, but They went against the reigning champions, Sweden. It was a close draw with them. The Netherlands, they won. Brazil, the Copa America champions, they had another very close loss to them. So Germany is probably one of the only teams that's been able to go out and like get a good combination of friendlies like this. How important is it to stay sharp with, going up against such nations prior to the World Cup?
Yeah, it was really important. It was a really really good lineup. Since the Euros, they also played France last October.
Mm.
That was a really really important game as well, I'd say. Yeah, playing against the US is always a tough test, and that really shows you like where the team is in their development.
Mm-hmm.
Netherlands, great opponent. Sweden as well. That was a really close draw, and I think Germany could have won that, but Sweden as well. And yeah, Brazil was a bit unfortunate, but they learned from that. And now having two opponents that they might have not played for a long time in Zambia, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam, that will be really, really interesting to see because, of course, you might think, oh, that's weaker opponents. But I think it's also opponents where the lineup, just the tactics, and all these things might not be as familiar as with other like teams from Europe or like North America. And I think that's also a very important test because they will come up against the likes in the group stages. So yeah, I think the pre that's not pre-season, but like the build-up plan towards the World
Yeah.
Cup was really well thought through with the opponents and with the camps, and really important, I'd say.
They've got easier send-off games, but like you mentioned, I think the send-off games are very close to the opponents that they're going to see in their group. Not an easy
I wouldn't
group.
say it's easy because like there's
Yeah.
really unpredictable opponents that you don't really see really often, that you don't really have on your radar.
Mm.
So you need like it's not as easy to prepare for them as maybe against the US, where you like know the players from like European competitions from the NWSL, which you can watch regularly. But just it's a bit more unfamiliar teams, but that doesn't make them like easy opponents like
Yeah.
automatically.
For sure. It's the underground teams, and I think especially a lot of these European teams that faced each other in the Euros, coming out of the Euros, they tried to switch up their opposition, but like again, we're likely met with more European opposition. Looking at Germany's group, it's a little bit different than the lineup that we've seen. Do you think there's certain challenges that they're going to come up against that maybe they haven't maybe drilled out as of recently, or I don't know, like looking maybe at the likes of Colombia, certainly not an easy team, and they had a great game against France a few friendlies ago. So maybe looking at these teams in the group before hopefully they advance, which we'll get to in a second. But how do you see that going? Is it going to be like massively tough? Are they sitting deep? How do you see those three games play out?
Again, it's difficult to predict because it's not opponents that you like play against every international window.
Mm-hmm.
I think every opponent at the World Cup was tough because everyone battled for their spot in the tournament and they didn't come there by doing nothing. As I said, unpredictable. Germany really need to be on their feet from the first game on. Need to see like how they harmonize as a team, like when they're in tournament mode again, kind
Mm-hmm.
of like see what's best with like with the formation, with the tactics. I mean, there's a fair chance I would say that Germany make it out of their group and advance to the knockout stages. I think that's we can be optimistic with that
Yeah.
one. But afterwards we'll see. But yeah, no easy games. But I'd say also like a good build up to the groups. Like the group stages are like a good build up to the knockout stages.
To the ones
And
after.
they want to go far in the tournament, obviously one of the favorites. There's of course a different pressure on them, like maybe at the Euros, because like Germany didn't play a really good World Cup, I'd say, like in France, like
Mm-hmm.
5 years ago already, or like no, four
Four.
years ago.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that people expected a lot from them at the Euros. Like also like the build up there was like
Mm-hmm.
that good result wise with the friendlies they played before. But right now, like all eyes are on Germany, so I'm really curious to see how that plays out on them because I think that can definitely be a bit of a changing factor, of course.
I know it's slightly different squads that we're talking about from 2019 to now, but if
But
maybe you were to observe some of these differences, whether it be personnel or even head coach or even just, how Germany have been able to develop some of these youngsters that now they've brought into the senior team, what things do you look at and you're like, Germany needs to make sure they do A, B, C, and D to go far in a tournament competition like this and ultimately have a shot at claiming a third World Cup in their history?
I mean, of course, there's been a massive development, but I think one thing that I look a bit critical at is like like the team struggled a lot. Like there were a lot of changes in the starting 11, and it wasn't really clear what was the clear starting 11. And once they had figured it out, like the head coach really relied on that starting 11. And I sometimes wonder, like there's players like Laura Freigang who like are of massive quality, like showcases it in the Frauen-Bundesliga every week in, week out, and hardly gets a chance in the national team. And I sometimes really wonder like why certain players don't have as much trust in their capabilities from the coaching staff than other players, because I think that would like the team has great like squad depth and like so many options to rotate and try things out, and I really wonder why that isn't happening. Like we tried out a lot of things, like it was weird things like playing Nicole Anjomi from Eintracht Frankfurt, who's like a forward at right back, and it resembled a bit like the Gwyn case, like, but it didn't play out. But they stuck with it like for a long time. Right now, like the experiment is over. Like head coach Martina Voss-Tecklenburg said she will take Nicole Anjomi as forward with her like into the camp, which is good. But like it's these things, like I think experiments were made on the wrong position, and some players are still being played out of position, and all these things. And like some players don't get a chance, and there's like small things, small details that still don't add up. And I think if you really want to make it to the final and get like the third World Cup title, every detail needs to be perfect, and I don't see that right now. So that's critical stuff to mention.
Critical stuff they need to figure out. Experimentation time is definitely before the World Cup, not during the World Cup.
Yes.
If you were to look at, currently just everything that we talked about, and if you were to put like a solid prediction, where would you put Germany going far into this one? No pressure, Alina.
No, not at all. I always say I don't do predictions, but it's an action,
Yeah.
so that's fine. I mean, I think we all played like a certain tournament predictor recently,
Yeah,
like on
we did.
Twitter, possibly.
Yeah.
And whenever I played it, I played several rounds of it. Like Germany always made it to the final.
Okay.
Yeah, that was interesting to see. I can see them going to the final, but there's these small details that need to be like made and turned into perfection, that need to be addressed and solved. And if that doesn't happen, I don't see them making it to the final. But definitely late group, like through the group stages and like late knockout stages, either like
Yeah.
final, let's be optimistic, or semi-final. But I think semi-final should be like the least like to aim for.
The
And I
goal.
think that's like the least, like the minimum goal that you should aim for. Of course, it should be the final. Of course, it should be the title. And there's a realistic chance. And like squad is great, but still like these small things. But overall, it's looking good for them, I'd say.
It's looking good for them. Yeah, certainly. I think Germany are going in with massive odds backing them, rightfully so. Relatively one of the healthiest squads. I know they've had some of their players fall out or just not be able up for selection, the likes of Dolman and Gwyn for injury.
Yeah.
But I do like the minimum goal of a semifinal. I think it's a popular one. Alina, I know we're running slightly short on time, but you cover plenty of German football. You cover plenty of these German players that are going to be heading into the World Cup. Where can people write? Or sorry, not write. They're not writing anything. They're reading. You're right.
DMs, please.
Yeah.
I've had too many of these. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter on @Alina_RXP.
There you go. I'll link everything down below. I certainly will leave very nice work that Alina has written on the German team post Euros and following up to the World Cup. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me on this very, very fun group that hopefully Germany will likely top.
Yeah, hopefully. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you. Well, that was Alina and Germany for you, but let's switch gears a little bit into the three other nations in this very interesting group. And I say very interesting because it's a group of runner-ups. You heard that right. Germany were the runner-ups in the Euros, Morocco were the runner-ups in the African Cup, Korea were the runner-ups in the Asian Cup, and you guessed it, Colombia were also the runner-ups in the Copa America. So this is a group of teams who have been into the final in their continental competitions, which makes this super, super interesting. And then kind of iconic storyline as well. I feel like you can certainly rate Germany to top the group. So it's going to be a battle between the rest of the runner-ups to see who is going to be the runner-up of that group. I feel like I said the runner-up a little too many times, but This is a very, very interesting group. So let's start off with Morocco. Morocco is a nation and a story that I have absolutely cherished and enjoyed watching over the last 3 years, because not only are they securing history by making their first ever appearance in the Women's World Cup, they are making history for being the first ever Arab nation and the first ever MENA region nation to debut in a World Cup. Like, this isn't just Morocco going to the World Cup. This is a lot of nations behind Morocco, and I think Morocco is doing this to inspire a lot of other nations. In 2020, they appointed French manager Renaud Pedros, which is a name you might be familiar with, as he did win the Champions League twice with Lyon, and he was also named the best FIFA women's coach in 2018. And this was kind of the start of some really, really bright things, and also a story of how a federation that invests in their team and their facilities and their personnel like a coach is going to provide some really good success, which has been a very important conversation as of recent months. And if anybody ever tells you, what do you mean by a federation needs to invest, you have to tell them about Morocco, because this is literally the story. They get out there, they hire a very, very trusted, experienced manager. They pay him very well. It was the offer that they had for him to bring him in was something really, really nice, not really seen by a federation of that region before. He's also a French manager, and a lot of the Moroccan players speak French, and that's something that actually a lot of the nations in that area struggle with, is you might always have kind of like a language barrier. Sounds like a very tiny little element, but when you're starting from scratch, or you're kind of putting in new visions and new goals, not having that language barrier there is a great start. That's another challenge you don't even have to tackle. The federation then built, or got on to build, a facility that was worth almost 70 million US dollars. It was a very, very luxurious set of buildings, training pitches. But the federation didn't just build this facility for the men's national team. This facility was built for every youth team, for every national team, whether it be men's or women's. And this is something that we have been seeing over the last few years with teams that have been succeeding, is shared facilities. The U17 ladies also qualified for their first ever Women's World Cup earlier last year, who were also using that facility. And so providing facilities that are new, that are clearly, high end, exactly what the players need to prepare and recover. They're also being given a manager that's experienced, knows how to put a good kind of like a young, gritty team together, which is how a lot of the African teams play. Now, in their African Cup run, including the qualifiers, they scored 9 goals from set pieces, and set pieces can be your game-changing moment. This is something that they are going to be a clear threat at the World Cup. They play a lot from the wings, mainly because a lot of their pacey and good players, and star players in my opinion, play on those wings. Giselle Chebec is a player that is fiery, pacey, gritty, physical, aggressive into every single battle. Was a very, very excellent role in their African Cup. Please remember the name, Giselle Chebec. You're going to be watching the game and you're going to be like, who is that absolutely crazy not running around? It's probably Chebec. Iman Saoud, another young, gritty midfielder, only 20 years of age. She was developed in France because that's where she grew up, but certainly a very mature and got that French style of midfield almost. Currently plays in Switzerland and had spells and appearances in the Champions League. They also have got Rosalena Ayan, another one of my personal favorites. She's only 24. Another midfielder, Fatimatan Gout, usually the one who is actually behind the set piece deliveries. Really, really good. Again, like very gritty, small, aggressive in the midfield. She's always running around. So for Morocco, I really, really like what they're doing. They're investing, they're supporting the players who, a lot of them actually play outside of Morocco. Morocco does have its own professional league. So the players that are at home getting developed are getting a good time being developed, but those that are outside, a lot of them are in Europe, and a lot of them have been key roles at their own respective clubs. They have fell short against the bigger European nations. They lost to Ireland once, they drew with them. Poland they lost to, Canada they lost to, Romania they lost to, so they certainly struggle against those European nations, and I think it's purely because this whole process has only been going on for 3 years. It takes a lot of time to be able to hit those peaks. Will they be able to pick up some points? I feel like there's definitely a win in there. Maybe another draw on top of it, but it's going to be those draws or wins between the runner-ups that I just talked about that's going to cement a second finish in the group. Which brings me to Colombia, the Copa America finalists. They've been in the World Cup in the 2011, 2015, missed out in the 2019, and are back in 2023 now. Now going in after missing the 2019 World Cup, it's definitely a lot more mature side and a lot more rejuvenated side than what we saw in 2015, even 2011. I don't even think there's a single player that is still from that remaining World Cup actually. Nelson Abadia, their head coach, loves to play a 4-2-3-1, which is kind of a very unorthodox formation for a Copa America team to come out with. They pretty much played it out against Argentina in the semifinal. Very impressive win. They eventually lost to Brazil, if you're not aware, in the final, but being able to come out with a 4-2-3-1, that's one of my favorite formations to see play out, but certainly not exactly how you expect these teams to come out with. A player absolutely crucial to that run and a name that you are most definitely familiar with is Linda Caicedo. I'm probably saying it incorrectly, but she's an absolute terror, and she's so young, and she's so good. You have probably seen Caicedo terrorize some defense lines in Liga F as she's a Real Madrid forward. If you haven't watched her, then what are you even doing? Because she's so good. She's only 18. I know. It's crazy, but she made her senior international debut at 14. Very much reminds me of like a Jessie Fleming story. Started off so young and is so important to her national team. She was a really important role in taking the U17s into their final of the World Cup last year. That was the first time that any Colombian national team has ever gone to a World Cup final at any youth stage, at any women's or men's. Like it was Colombia that did this last year, and Caicedo was such an important role in doing that. Looking at her numbers, she's not your prolific goal scorer who's going to leave with double digits out of a competition, but she's the type of player that is really good in setting up her teammates. So either is that dragging away defenders, she's really rapid, so she can allow her marker to lose her very frequently. She has this aura about her where players almost want to double and triple mark her, which opens the opportunities for a lot of her prey. So maybe she's not the one that's actually banging in the goals, but her movement off and on the ball is so important to how Colombia has been able to even execute that 4-2-3-1 formation that I was just talking about. Lacey Santos, that also saw her rise in the U17 women's national team back when she was 15. Again, I'm going to bring out another Jessie Fleming, but she really does remind me of a Jessie Fleming. Captained her U17 when she was only 15. Now, even though the roster hasn't been named just yet, she's definitely in, but she's one of those players that was in Canada for the 2015. So over that stretch, you don't have a lot of players that are in the squad currently that went to that final World Cup in 2015. So being able to retain those experienced players is going to be so important. She's a very creative number 9, very experienced, very mature. Her link-up play, I think, is really nice, and we saw plenty of display on that during the Copa America. Again, a very Jessie Fleming style of number 10 as well. Super versatile, often drops in the 6 and the 8. Really just depends how Colombia is doing, but Colombia can pull on some crazy surprises. The friendlies in April, I believe, most definitely April, though they did lose to France eventually. They were leading 2-0 at some point. So Colombia can certainly do some damage, really good on set pieces, and if there's somebody to pull an upset, Colombia is very seasoned at doing that. Moving on to Korea, our fourth and final team. They're also making their 4th World Cup appearance. So they played in the 2003 World Cup and then absolutely ghosted that competition for 12 years. And then we're back in 2015, in Canada, 2019, and now for the 4th time in 2023. They did have a bright 2015. They even beat Spain into that, but they got knocked out in the round of 16. 2019, they got knocked out of the group stages, didn't really win anything. So this time they're certainly looking to rebound from what was a very disappointing campaign in France. They're currently working with English head coach Colin Bell, who has had plenty of experience around in Europe, specifically in Germany, won the Champions League in Frankfurt, shall I say. Unsurprisingly, loves to play his classic 4-3-3. That's what you see a lot of English and German coaches play out with, but having to adjust to more of an Asian nation style, or specifically when you go up against teams that are really difficult to defend against, you have to play more of like a lower block. So he often deploys like a 3-4-3 with what you see with Japan, or a 3-5-2 even. Their high intensity football is different than the regular European high intensity football of like attack. This is more of like keep possession, don't give the ball away, like absolutely keep possession in the middle, in the back, keep possession. And I think a lot of the players absolutely suit that. That team absolutely floods with technical abilities, very similar to Japan, and I gonna compare them to Japan a lot because that's kind of a lot of the Asian teams of how they play. They love their possession. Their players are so technical, but they have an issue with not converting those chances or that possession into goals. Like, if you look at the ratio of possession or frequency of possession to their ratio of goals, it's really not great to look at. We saw in the Arnold Clark Cup that they can definitely put on a ton of pressure and like very quick concessions. I think they need to figure out how to be able to make those concessions a little bit longer or maybe a little bit closer to each other. I was able to watch them against Canada live a year ago. It was a draw that I showed up to. So not only are they kind of good at frustrating other teams when they defend because Canada was not able to score, but they still struggle to be able to convert their possession into goals. Now, not to say that Canada had a really good defensive game that game as well. You think Korea, you absolutely think of Ji So-yeon, a Chelsea legend, arguably, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, female Korean player in the history of Korean football. She's going into her third World Cup. I mean, do I really need to talk about Ji? She's so good. She is one of the best midfielders that ever graced the WSL. Her free kicks are unreal. Her link-up play, her IQ, like... some days I really wish that Ji was still in the WSL in that blue shirt. And this is not even coming from a Chelsea fan or this is from a neutral perspective. You absolutely loved to watch Ji. So we're getting more of her in the World Cup now. You also have Chu So-yeon from Spurs in the WSL. You've also got Lee Jo-young from Madrid CFF. You've also got a very tall Park Eun-sun in the middle there. A young and versatile and almost maybe kind of like another Ji Chun Graham in attack. It's a very interesting set of players when I look at it because it's very different in the qualities that they have. And I think that is a great advantage, but I don't think they've been able to nail it down in terms of every single player really showing that advantage altogether just yet. You can have plenty of individual qualities, but it's a real question of making sure all those individual qualities rise to a collective brilliance. And that question still hasn't quite been answered for me just yet for Korea. They came in really close in that final. And I think it was those moments, those peaks of individual players that just didn't come out. They've got some really nice, good fullbacks, very versatile fullbacks. Both of them can play either on the left or on the left or the right. On the left or the right, and making sure you're able to allow them to show that versatility, maybe even drop in for more of like an inverted fullback against certain opposition. Like just making sure you're able to use those qualities from every single player is super important, and I really hope that's what we're able to see this World Cup. Now, I hate making predictions, and I did make predictions for the first two teams. I think for this one, I will likely have to edge it to Colombia, but it's anybody's ball game because everybody's coming in as a runner-up in their own continental cup nation. I'm going to this absolutely supporting Morocco because I really love their story. I think what they're doing is they're inspiring a lot of nations in the Arab world. There's a lot of stereotypes and a lot of barriers and challenges, much more than the European world, that these Arab nations and MENA nations and that part of the African world is still looking to break down before any of the investment or anything that we're talking about right now starts happening. With Morocco appearing and hopefully leaving it all on the fields, I'm going to admire that, and I'm going to absolutely cherish it. As a person who of Arab origins, this is just really cool and really awesome, and it's going to inspire, I definitely know this, a lot of girls back home. This is certainly going to be a very fun group of runner-ups. Like I mentioned, Germany, again, one of your favorites to win this competition, like Alina and I spoke. The three other ones, definitely don't sleep on him. And want to hear your opinions on Group H? How do you say that one? I've been having a crisis all day trying to pronounce it. Regardless, I want to know your opinions, your thoughts, and how you're liking the series so far. I would love to hear some feedback on how this has been informative, if at all. If not, let me know. As always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.